Welcome everybody back to Boost in Motion, guys. And today we have episode 3 of Bringing the Boost series. And we have Sonic Tune in the building to talk about all your tuning needs for your Infinity Nissan platform and a couple other cars and his other specialties and everything like that. So guys, let's jump into it. Introducing Sonic Tune to the chat. Appreciate you, brother. So go ahead. Tell them about what you do, man.
All right. My name is Mark, obviously. I am a EcuTech master tuner. I primarily tune Infinitis, Nissans, the G37, 370Zs, the Q cars, obviously. I'm also a certified Infiniti master technician. I've been tuning since about 2009, and I've been a master tech since 2015.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, that's freaking great. Okay, so mostly you guys already know this channel is mainly infinities. So
Yep.
let's just jump. Let's because you tuned 3.7. So let's just talk about a little bit because this is kind of like ask the tuner type of content.
Yep.
And what would be some of the common modifications that uh someone with a 3.7 would ask? So do you think I'm just gonna jump right into it because I
Yep.
used to have a 3.7. Do you think it's better to tune is it cost efficient to get headers over test pipes?
Not really. I mean, being the fact that it's NA, what I mean, you don't really get the power that you get out of, like, let's say the 3.0 or the GTR engines. You do make decent power off going full headers. I would always recommend them over just test pipes, just because the design, the way they flow, you get a lot more top end,
Mhm.
quite a bit louder, obviously, but that's depending on what people like for sound. But as far as
Mhm.
power goes, if you're trying to get the most out of the car and you're trying to really, break whatever record or max out the actual platform, then yeah, I would definitely go with the headers with that car with the 3.7.
Okay. Here's another common one, right? Because I'm just
Yep.
spitballing whatever
Oh
comes to my
yeah,
head because I used to
absolutely.
be 3.7. Um, in the community of the 3.7 world too, is do you really see much gains going with long tube air intakes? At least the majority off the shelf ones or custom 3-inch ones, the larger ones.
Honestly, not again. We're talking NA, not that much.
Mm-hmm.
Um, if you do a bigger motor, you put a stroker motor in the car, or you go a little bit bigger
Mm-hmm.
like that, you might gain a little bit, but honestly, it's nothing crazy. We're
So do you think
talking
that's a
peanuts.
that people should actually skip if they
No,
tune
no.
in
I
at
mean, it's
3.7?
if you have nothing, definitely go with the longer. Obviously the cold air intakes. But if you already have some sort of cold air intake, going
Mm-hmm.
from that to the longer ones, you're not really going to gain. It's not going to be noticeable. You're not going to go from 12.5 to 12.1 just from switching the intakes.
Okay.
Let's say
I
the
mean,
quarter
we're
mile.
not really trying to insert any promos here, but I don't mind it. So there's some of the over the shelf long term intakes. I remember was it Stillin, Takeda? We're talking mainly the G37
Yep, yep.
370Zs. And then you have short RAM ones. So what you're saying is they don't perform that much more better over the short RAM intakes
I
from your
mean,
experience?
the difference is, I mean, obviously you're drawing cold air in from the front of the car versus drawing hot air in from the engine bay.
Hmm.
But, depending on what we're looking at for numbers, you're just not going to see like a 20, 30 horsepower difference. You know what I mean?
Mm.
Especially when you're moving pretty fast, all that engine heat gets taken out of the engine bay really quick from the air coming in from the front bumper. So, the air intakes actually, the temperatures aren't as crazy as you would think, like versus checking the intake air temperature sitting at a light in the middle of summer versus doing 100 on the highway or 100 at the track. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Because the airflow is, you're flowing so much air that it doesn't really matter, and it's flowing so fast, the engine's
Hmm.
swallowing that air so fast that it doesn't really have that much, it doesn't won't really heat up that much, if that
Ah,
makes
okay.
sense.
Oh, no, I get it. Oh, I completely get it. Okay, cool. Because it's literally like me axing a tuner, and I am, and I'm
Of
gonna just go this. It's kind of good.
course.
So the next question is, I am against people porting their upper and lower intake manifolds on a 3.7. I am against it. I think it's not cost efficient at all. They used to do that in the Maxima days because I was 3.0 Maxima days, but the amount of money that you put into it, I don't think there's much of a gain. But as a tuner, once again, anything that maximizes your performance is still needed. But in your honest opinion, do you think that's something that people should skip?
It all depends on what you want to do. Again, if
Mm-hmm.
you're trying to get the absolute most out of your car and you want to squeeze every single horsepower, do it. Me personally, if I had a 3.7, I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't waste my time. It just, again, if we're talking numbers as far as performance versus on the dyno, you're not really gonna to gain much on let's say like a lowly modded car. Now if we're talking force induction, turbos, something that when you're trying to force a lot more air through the engine than it normally takes, from vacuum, then yeah, it will start to make a difference. But again, if you're talking just a basic daily driver, save that for something else. You get a lot more power out of E85 going over, ported intakes.
Thank you for saying that.
This is just my opinion, by the way. It's
I mean,
just
remember,
how
you're
I
a
feel.
tuner, so
Yep.
you're the master tech here. So it's your opinion through your experience.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, you have the data to back it up.
Yep.
In my previous videos, I said that I would rather people go with E85 over like long tube intakes and
Ported intake.
long tube headers.
Okay.
I said that in my previous video because I said it's just more cost efficient and the car will just drive better than if you just went with just headers. You know what I'm saying? But this is just my opinion, though, from just seeing dynographs and talking to other people.
Well, with headers, and if you're talking, power, volumetric efficiency and stuff like that, you will gain more up top, but you lose a little bit down low. The more flow you have in an exhaust system or an intake system, it will shift something called volumetric efficiency, and that's how efficient the engine is at a certain RPM versus being low or up top. And anytime you open up something like the exhaust, when you put headers on it, you get a lot more power up top, but you lose a little bit of torque down low. And again, we're talking the V6. On the V8 cars, I tune Corvettes and other things like that as well.
Big change, right? It's a big change.
Cubic inches is where it makes a difference. Like I said, if you put a stroker in these cars, I don't know what they have for what you can do with the stroker setups.
I'm not too positive.
Yeah, but you open up the engine, you open up the displacement, and then stuff like that is going to start to matter a lot more.
Okay.
These engines are very, very efficient from the factory. As far as cylinder heads go, even cams. Cams aren't very popular on these cars just because it's more headache than not versus.
Yes, I know two people who did it. It's like once you do it, that's it. You're like, I don't even want to keep this car anymore. You could
and a lot. Yep. Like you're about to say, yeah, a lot of people go that far and then they hate the car. Hey, why is the car riding funny? Why is the car, sucked down low? And again, with camshafts, it's the same thing. You put bigger cams in the car, you're shifting the power band up. So anything below that power band now, you're trying to drive around a parking lot and the car is going to drive like crap, But then when you go to make that highway pole, you're going to make a pole, you'll feel it up top, But
okay. To move it along, your opinion as a tuner.
Yep.
I think a couple years, not a couple years. It was good years back where single exits was like the top thing in the VQ platform. Some other tuners stated that they gained a little bit of performance. But once again, we're talking about single digits. But in your opinion, do you think it actually gains a little bit more? 3-inch exhaust?
A 3-inch single exhaust versus what?
Single exit versus twin. What I mean?
Yeah. I mean, you need to have some sort of merge. But I think that the biggest thing that you get from a single 3-inch exhaust versus doing the dual exhaust is it sounds much better. You have all that exhaust sound coming out of one pipe versus coming out of both. Like some guys in the VR30 world, they like to do the true dual setups where there's no X pipe or no H pipe at all. And they don't sound as well. They perform decent, but they just don't sound as good. When you do a single exhaust like that, like I said, again, NA, we're talking, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be, you might gain a little, but you might not. It's all preference. If you like the look of the single exhaust and you like the way it sounds, go for it. For me personally, when I had a 350Z actually with a Corvette engine and a turbo, and I had, made the cover of Modified Magazine with it in 2011. I was the first person to ever do it.
Some heavy hitters, man.
Yeah, it was my personal car. And
oh my God. It's daily.
I actually daily drove the car with a roll cage, a massive fuel pump. It was pretty rough, but I drove the car for 3 years like that. And I had a single 4-inch exhaust, and I just loved the way the car sounded. turbo versus NA. When you go turbo, you don't have the bank-to-bank exhaust pulses. So do you know what scavenging is?
Yes,
So
scavenging
basically,
effect. Yes.
yeah, one bank pulls in between each exhaust pulse. They kind of go, like
So
that,
it
and they
creates
help.
a vacuum in the exhaust.
Exactly. With turbo cars, it's not the same, obviously, because you have, let's say, on the VR30, you have 3 cylinders being squished into one and then coming out of a compressor wheel. So there's no scavenging effect.
Mm-hmm.
You will get a pretty decent scavenging effect with a single 3-inch exhaust, just because, again, everything's merging at the merge,
Mm-hmm.
and it comes out
It
that
keeps the
way.
heat up too in the flow. Yeah.
Exhaust velocity, yeah, you want to keep that stuff coming out as fast as possible, obviously, to help with exhaust flow. Yep.
Okay. All right. So you've tuned because we're gonna get into the Q50 stuff,
Yeah.
but we're talking still about 3.7s. Have you tuned 3.7 twin turbo and supercharged also?
Not yet.
Mm-hmm.
So the way I am, if I don't have the car in front of me and I don't have enough time with it, I don't want to. I won't just. Can I do it? Absolutely.
Yes.
But as of this time, and probably for the foreseeable future, there are much better options out there.
Okay.
Martin from RS Enthalpy, he's an absolute G when it comes to those cars.
Okay.
If I have guys that come to me with bigger build setups like that, I always refer them to him, just because he does them almost on a daily basis. And
Mm,
again, like I said, if I can't perfect my tune, I'm not going
mm-hmm.
to put it out just to make some money. Um,
Makes sense.
the VR30, for instance, I tuned my car probably 600 revisions before I was ready to even give it to one person. We're talking
Oh.
7 days a week, 12 hours a day for almost 6 months. And then when I felt like it was something good enough, then I started with one customer, then two, then it started growing.
Mm-hmm.
But my biggest fear was just throwing out a tune just to kind of get my name out there and blowing up cars. I would have been over
Okay.
before I started. So I've taken this approach very, very carefully. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I have an amazing track record right now. I have one car that broke a timing chain with 130,000 miles on it, and I had a
Mm-hmm.
couple of cars spit out injectors. But other than that, I'm almost at 100 cars right now with no massive failures.
That's freaking great. So
Yep.
what made you get your Q60? You have a Q60, correct? See if I'm
Yes.
wrong.
Yep.
So
Yep.
what made you hop in? Because I mean, it seems like you're kind of a Nissan guy. So Nissan Infiniti
uh,
guy. So what made you get the Q60?
So, funny story. I was a master tech for my dealership. And
Okay.
one day I was actually working on a G37, and my hand slipped off the wrench and I punched the bottom of the car, broke my wrist.
Oh my
Um,
fucking god.
Went to the VA. My wrist was broken. They casted it up. I tried to be a tough guy. I got out of the hospital, tried to cut the cast off and go back to work. I tried to
Yep.
hide it.
Just
Within a
like most
couple of
men.
days, my hand was curled up, and I'm like, oh man,
Oh
I
shit.
talk way too much shit to have a hand like this.
Mm-hmm.
Ended up having to get surgery, and um, talking to the owner of the dealership, I said,
Mm-hmm.
listen, I don't want workman's comp. I don't want anything
Yes.
like that. Put me in the back filing papers. I don't care. I don't want to not be at work for the next few months.
Yes.
And I guess whatever I said worked. And he's like, how about you become the service manager? And I'm
Okay.
like, going from a
Okay.
technician to becoming a service manager was a big step, but I
Yes.
couldn't
'Cause
I
now you
couldn't
gotta
be a
talk
tech
to
anymore.
people and deal with paperwork and stuff, right?
Every day. And I was one of the technicians that, if a service advisor, had an issue with a customer, needed something explained, I would always talk to the customers. I was very articulate when
Mm-hmm.
explaining how things work. So they thought it was a good idea. And I became the service manager. And when it was time
Mm-hmm.
to get rid of my 370Z, actually, for a car, I was going to get either an M4 or a Q60. And the store managers were like, let's get you in a Q. We'll get you a really good price. And they gave me an amazing price
Ah.
on it. So, and they paid for most of the actual, the loan as part of being a service manager.
What?
Yeah. They gave me
So
$500 a month
it was a
allowance.
benefit. It was beneficial. So
Yeah.
wait, you had 350Z swap with a V8, then you had
Yep.
a 370Z,
Yep.
right? With the
Yep.
370Z was NA too?
It was NA. It was mostly stock, and I used it to tow my 500 horsepower jet ski.
Oh shit. So you
Yeah.
do got like
Everywhere.
jet skiing and because I remember I saw you into bikes too. I'm not into bikes, but I saw you into bikes too. Like you play with anything with a motor, man.
Yeah. Yeah. I just sold my bike, actually, where I got the name Sonic from. Um, the bike is blue, and I was trying to come up with some sort of name for Instagram, and I thought Jick Sonic, and it kind of stuck. And then the bike kind of not blew up engine wise, but,
Yeah.
became very popular, and I literally started the name as a joke. I'm like Sonic Tuned because someone's like, hey, is that bike tuned by one of my friends, Evan? I'm like, no, it's Sonic Tuned. And that's kind of how it started, off a joke like that.
And now you're building your business
And
off
now
of
I'm
it.
building my business. Yep.
That's what I'm freaking talking about. So you got the Q60 now because you
Yep.
got a great steel, and then I don't know, like you seem like you're into modifying cars. So what was some of the what would
Everything.
be some of the what was some of your first modifications, but and/or what would you recommend if as a tuner would you recommend that these guys get first?
Okay. So I'm very specific when it comes to the VR30. I tell my customers, if you're looking for something that you want to daily drive, not have a lot of issues with, enjoy it, not have that oil smell, lower downpipes, exhaust, intakes, and heat exchanger. Done. Perfect
Mm,
daily driver. It's a mid to high 11-second car. It's going to last forever. My car's got almost 40,000 miles on it. I've made well over 600 passes. I have well over 100 and something launches. Stock turbos, original engine, original transmission.
mm,
I just keep it very, very moderate.
mm,
After that, I'd say go with flex fuel. Flex fuel, as we know, E85, E30 on these things even it's a completely different car. Um,
mm-hmm.
and that right there is about where I would stop as far as having like just a nice daily driver. You want
Okay.
to start going faster. You want to get into the tens. Then we're talking full down pipes, bigger fuel pump, more ethanol, obviously.
Mm.
No blow off valves, period.
Stay away from.
Stay away from the blow off valves,
Well, I do want to jump in and sit there and say
Yeah,
this because I mean, my tuner, is Hussein, and
very good friend of
I
mine.
said in the community about a year and a half ago. I said I don't really care for blow valves. It could be aid in helping relieve the excess boost pressure, but I always sit there and say this too. Make sure you guys install it properly.
Yeah.
Make sure, because even me, when I installed my DIY kit, when it started leaking, I was like, wait, something's wrong here. I was like, oh shit, it's loose. And I was like,
Yep.
this could really destroy my turbos. Luckily, I caught it. So I could just
Yes.
imagine how much you as a tuner, you go and you tune in people's cars and you're like, there's something wrong here. You just looking through the files, there's something wrong, and boom, you find a boost leak.
So how detailed do you want me to go into this? Because I can break it down to
Um,
the atom.
Listen, I don't mind. Listen. At the end of the day, this is your platform right now. If
Yeah.
you want people to know the information, you could give it, man. I have no problem, man. Go
So
ahead.
here's the thing: blow off valves on a turbo car, when it comes to like a manual car or other platforms, absolutely recommended. I mean, hands down, it helps the turbos. Obviously for boost creep, when you every time you shift, obviously you're letting off the throttle on a manual vehicle,
Mm-hmm.
and it just causes a lot more stress on both the turbos and the piping and just everything. So the
Mm-hmm.
blow off valves do help quite a bit. On
Mm-hmm.
this platform specifically, they do not help at all. They are
Mm-hmm.
nothing more than a noisemaker. And again, this is me talking about. I bought them myself. I bought them myself. I tuned them, and I was looking at the data, and literally, I was on one of my arguments online, and I posted 10 logs back to back, and I said, "Tell me which log has the blow off valve, and tell me which logs don't," because
Ah,
if you look at logs, you can see that right when you let off the gas, you get a boost. You get a boost
boost.
spike.
Yep, a boost spike. Mm-hmm.
Nothing was changed. They are completely random, whether you have the blow off valves on or not. And that's due to the way the car closes the throttle bodies. So the GTR, for example, comes with blow off valves. So built into the logic, when you let off the gas, the throttle bodies close immediately, and it relies on the blow off valves to open up and relieve the pressure. Well,
Mm-hmm.
these cars don't come with a blow off valve from the factory. So built into the logic, and this is something that tuners, I've been searching with EcuTech. I mean, we've been looking everywhere for these tables, these hidden logic tables that we just can't find. They might not even be in there.
Mm-hmm.
Because the cars don't have blow off valves from the factory, they use the throttle bodies as a means to slow the turbos down. So what happens is when
Mm-hmm.
you let off the gas, the throttle body closes for a second, almost opens a little more, and then closes again. And
Mm-hmm.
if you look at your logs, you always see a double spike every time, whether you have blow off valves or not. That's the blow off. That's the throttle bodies closing, opening, and closing again, gives you the spike. And after installing them, I noticed again that the spike wasn't going away, where I thought it would. And I noticed that every time I'd come to a light, the car would stumble. And what's happening is because this car specifically does not have VE or speed density. I'm sorry, it doesn't have a speed density capabilities as of this time, and they may not ever.
What is
Um,
speed density? Just jumping in.
so So speed density is when you remove the mass airflow meters, when you're basically
Okay.
using, you have a table and you are telling the car exactly what you want it to fuel, and you're not
Mhm,
relying on the mass airflow meters to
mhm,
dictate how much air is going to the engine to pre-fuel the engine.
mhm.
So what happens, like with a mass airflow meter, it has like a little tiny wire that heats up,
Yes,
and
I
as
know what you're
air,
talking about.
yep, and as
Mhm.
air
Well, go
passes
ahead.
over
This
it,
this is for the viewers. Uh-huh.
yeah, yeah. And as air passes over it, it basically will cool it down or, heat it up. And that tells the engine how much fuel, or the ECU, how much fuel to put into the engine. So what
Mhm.
happens is this car, the mass airflow meter is before the blow off valve. So essentially what you're
Yeah.
doing is every time you let off the gas and you open that blow off valve, air that's passing through the mass airflow meter that should be going into the engine goes out the blow off valve. Now, what
Mhm,
happens is the ECU still thinks that air is in the intake track, so it's going to
mhm,
pre-fuel the car to, accommodate that airflow. Well, what's
mhm.
happening is the airflow is going out of the blow-off valves and is dumping all that extra fuel into the car. And you'll notice, like when you come to a light, the car will kind of stumble sometimes. It kind of, the RPMs will dip and drop,
Mhm.
and over time, your fuel trims will turn to complete shit.
Okay.
You foul out spark plugs faster. You won't wash down the cylinders. It's not that much fuel, but
Mhm.
again, any air that passes by the mass airflow meter has to go into the engine. Now, if there was a way to put the blow off valve on the other side of it, you might be fine. So the mass airflow meter in between the blow off valve and the throttle body, then you're not going to have any issues like that. The
Okay.
blow off valve still isn't going to do its job just because of the throttle body logic with these
Mhm,
cars, but you're not
mhm.
going to have those rich dips in fuel that you get now whenever you let off the gas. And it's every time.
Okay. Do you think that also could be attributed to, let's say, the blow-off valve spring rate? Because I realize like HKS's spring rate is like super soft, right? But
Yes,
I've tried
that
different
just makes
other
it worse.
eBay blow-off
Yep.
valves, and I noticed they use a lot stiffer springs, so I don't have those problems unless, let's say, I'm flooring it and I let off like at a high RPM, then it'll blow off. It
Yep.
usually has to gain a lot of boost pressure for it to blow off, or I bang the rev limiter.
Well, watch your fuel trims when watch your air fuel when it does that. Every time,
Okay.
the more air you hear coming out of the blow off valve, if you look at the data, you'll see it dip into the 10, sometimes even deeper than that. And
Okay.
again, we all know that you don't want to go that rich with these cars because you'll fall out the spark plugs. It kills
Mhm.
performance, and your fuel trims. Basically, these engines or these ECUs have they have learning parameters, so they learn how you drive.
Mhm.
Um, they also account for wear and tear. So as you're driving and you change the spark, let's say the spark plugs are 20,000 miles old, your air filters
Okay.
are getting a little clogged up. The fuel
Mhm.
trims, the long-term fuel trims, will actually account for all that, and it can kind of make up for the engine as it's wearing down over time. Well,
Mhm.
when you have the blow-off valves letting out all that extra air, the long-term fuel trims and the short terms don't know what the hell they're doing. They're going everywhere at all times.
Mm.
And then it just eventually, the computer's trying to make up for that rich spot every single time, and it will start pulling fuel or it'll start adding fuel. And then it's just not doing its
Mm.
job right. And then on top of that, you also introduce about 11 new leaking points. If you think of
The
every,
connection
every connection versus, the two connections at the what do you call them? I'm sorry,
at
I'm
the
having
the,
a
the T couplings, the
yeah, the
T
T
couplings.
couplings, the
Yeah.
boost lines itself.
Yeah.
And like you said before, you caught your leak, correct?
Yeah.
Well, one of the things that I built into my tune, I have some safety provisions for leaks. Not that I'm going to share with
Yeah.
with other people, but um, if the tuner doesn't know, again, if the tuner is inexperienced or doesn't really think about things like
Mhm.
this,
Mhm.
if you have a small leak on one of your blow off valves, the engine's computer is called an integral value for the
Okay.
blow off or for the wastegates will actually make up for that leak. It'll continue closing the wastegate to speed the turbo up faster and faster and faster,
Mhm.
trying to make up for that leak. And as we all know, these stock turbos are not the best. And
Mhm.
you start spinning them over 250,000 RPMs,
Bye bye
and that's
seals.
it.
Bye bye
Bye bye
turbo.
seals, bye bye turbo. And a lot of
Mhm.
people blow their turbos eventually over time because they may have a small leak and they don't realize it. Um, when I'm tuning and I'm looking at data logs, I know what to look for, so I
Mhm.
can usually tell you what side if there is a leak or whatnot.
Mhm.
But 99% of my customers that have had blow off valves have removed them and they've been happier for it.
Okay. I mean, I also want to add this at
Yeah,
another part too. This is just me theoretically
of
thinking,
course.
because I know a lot of people who've gotten tuned in the last 4 or 5 years, and I don't want to disclose other tuners, but their cars pop turbos on the dyno or shortly after, and I just couldn't understand it. So, but then I thought about the logic on the modifications that they had on the car, and I was like, they had a boost leak. But I don't want to get involved because I'm like, hey, I'm just some random dude with a YouTube channel. No one's gonna
Yep.
believe me. People would just attribute it to, yeah, it was just the turbos, they ain't shit. But then, honestly, like you would say, as a tuner, if those turbos are compensating and spinning faster to give you that meet that boost target, it might be hitting 300,000 RPM,
Exactly.
and that's it. It's gone.
Yep. Yep. And again, now,
Wait, I have another question before you go.
but
Would would you be able to look? Well, I don't know if this is still on secret sauce, but would you be able to look at exhaust gas temperature for that side to know if it is spinning faster? Because usually, if you're running higher, no,
yeah,
it
yeah.
would. So it'll still be the
Now,
same consistent exhaust gas temperature comparing, let's say, 15 psi to 25. It'll be similar.
it wouldn't be something that would be completely noticeable.
Oh shit.
Because
Okay.
the exhaust gas temperature is mostly dictated by the cylinder temperature.
Okay.
The turbo spooling up that fast isn't going to generate that kind of heat that you're actually going to see.
Mm-hmm.
But like you said before, like you were just saying, let me touch back on what you're saying about the dyno and
Go ahead.
everything.
Yeah.
It's definitely, I think, one of the biggest contributing factors to turbos blowing are inexperienced tuners, for one, when they're tuning on the dyno or just tuning in general, but also unaccountable leaks that are unaccounted for. And I can only speak for myself, but I have yet to have a single customer, period, blow a turbo. That's not saying it's not going to happen, because we all have bad luck. I have just gotten, it's skill, but it's also a lot of it has to do with luck. I have almost 100 customers without a single failure. It's bound to happen. And I tell every one of my customers, at some point, somebody's going to break. It's just, parts
Hardware
do fail
happens.
sometimes.
Hardware breaks, man.
Hardware
It's
breaks,
what it is.
But the fact that I have this many vehicles out there right now and not a single blown turbo, it kind of says something. Every one of my customers, I tell them to take the blow valves right off, and when they don't, I usually find a leak on one of the sides, and then they go and they look, and I can tell, because one of the ways you can tell if a turbo is leaking is wastegate position. So you can monitor the boost on both turbos, but if one wastegate is, let's say, 0.5 millimeters more closed than the other one, you have a leak on that side, because that is closed half a millimeter, which is quite a bit, half a millimeter more than the other side, just to make the same boost level. So either one, you have a bad turbo, or two, you if you have blow valves, it's most likely leak on that side.
Oh, okay. That's actually pretty dope, man. Thank you for that. That's some really good information. Oh my God.
Yep.
Okay. Oh man, I'm really thankful for that one. Now I know. That's the hardcore data there. Wow. So
Data doesn't lie.
have you tuned upgraded turbos such as RT turbos or pures, and what's your
Yes.
experience from it? So if a person wanted to build, let's say, matter of fact, let's stick with the E85 a little bit. Just on regular stock turbos.
Of
So
course.
do you think, in your honest opinion, that is recommended to upgrade your injectors on stock turbo? If you want to run E85, or no?
So again, I just have to say that this is an opinion. I don't think you should run E85 on stock turbos, period.
Okay.
Now, a mix of E, absolutely. But just for reference, I have a customer right now who is the tune is very conservative on pure stage twos. He's making 651 horsepower to the wheels on E70. The way I look at it is ethanol is absolutely incredible, but it's very corrosive. So the way I approach e-tuning is I put as enough E in the car, just what's needed to get to the power level that you're looking for. You don't need to run full 85 if you're just trying to make 450 horsepower. It's just, yes, it'll help, but the trade-offs with how hard the fuel system's working, how hard the injectors are working, what you're doing to the aluminum in the engine over time, it's just not worth that much. So I tend to keep my customers around E60 max on stock turbos with stock injectors.
Okay.
And again, that's just me. That's just because, like I said, if you think about it, full E85, you can make well over 1,000 horsepower on it. You don't need full E85 to make 500 horsepower, to make 450 horsepower. What you do gain, if you do decide to go that much, though, is you do gain the cooling benefits. One thing people don't think about, and it's kind of hard for me to explain, so I try not to. There are a few topics that I try not to get into, just because I don't really know how to explain it. I know I understand it, but if you've seen some of the posts that I've made explaining things, I try to make it easily understandable for the regular person who isn't the car, fanatic.
Mm-hmm.
But one thing that I tell my personal customers, my private group, is the more E you run, the less cooling you need intercooler wise. Because as you know, ethanol is, it's like alcohol. It does
burns
cool
cooler.
heat. It burns cooler because as it evaporates, it does pull heat out of the intake, out of the intake tract. So the more ethanol you run, the smaller the heat exchanger, the smaller the intercoolers. You can almost run no intercoolers on full E85 and not have an issue. And like, again, my customer making 651, he's doing it on a frozen boost little baby heat exchanger on stock intercoolers, and he's completely fine with it. And it makes the power. There's no issues with it whatsoever.
I have a question. So I've been told by other tuners in this platform too, same thing for the VR30. After like E6, E7, there's really no point. Like there's no real additional gain in power. That was told to me.
That is true.
In your experience, is that true?
So typically after E50 to E55-ish, that's where the timing gains kind of stop. So let's say I'm doing a pure stage 2 car, right? I set, because with EXHUAST, you can do everything with that app or with that tuning software. You can set for flex fuel when full boost happens, you can set when full timing happens, and then you can set when the air fuel changes, and you can do them all separately from each other. So for instance, on a pure stage 2 car, I have full boost coming in at E70 and above, but I have full timing coming in at E55 and above. Because after that, like you said, and other tuners have said, it doesn't really make that much of a difference at the power levels that the VR30s put out.
Okay, that's actually pretty dope.
Yeah.
All right, so so I just wanted to spitball other questions. So now,
well,
okay, this one is a good one. This one's a good one. A lot of people make this argument, and I think I've even jumped in theoretically because I'm not a fan of full catless. But in your honest opinion, do you think full catless is really recommended on these cars?
What kind of setup?
What's the VR30 stock turbo?
Stock turbos.
Full catless. E85, 93 tune. Like, I mean, what do you think? In your honest opinion.
And again, just an opinion. I put them on my car and I took them off right away. The smoking problems that you have from the turbos, it was obnoxious. I was able to get it down a lot by putting thicker oil in the car. But I think that catted fulls would be the best bet as far as having a street car. First of all, it's legal.
Yes.
I won't, we're not allowed to turn off emission stuff with everything going on the EPA. I don't touch that stuff. So, when I have customers that say, hey, I have catless downpipes, what can you do for me? I want nothing to do with it. On top of, not being able to get rid of the check engine light, it just, with stock turbos, they're just no good. And again, if you're trying to max out, you're trying to break records, you're trying to, you don't care if your turbos go, you don't care if your engine's going to break, like you want to push those numbers, do it, but for the guy who drives the car every day on the street and who doesn't want to smell every time you come to a stop, that massive puff of oil that comes out, my car had 30,000 miles on it, not a single puff of oil. I put my full downpipes on it. Within 3 days, it was smoking everywhere.
Okay. Is it easier to control turbo surge with a full catted downpipe? If that's even like a thing as a tuner?
The boost curves are just completely different. When looking at the wastegate tables, because these cars do have electronic wastegate tables, the actual table itself is much sharper. So it comes in a lot harder, and then you have to drop it off really quick because it'll end up over-spooling if you don't control the boost properly, but then you start losing boost up top. So you have to open the gates a lot more than, let's say, no downpipes or just lower downpipes. You have to open it a lot more by around 5,000 RPMs, but then you have to close it a lot faster by redline, or you'll get that boost spike and then you'll drop right off.
Okay.
So as far as, like to answer your question, it's just the tables. You put enough time into your boost control tables, it's all the same thing.
Oh, okay. That's actually pretty good. Man, this is so freaking good, man. I'm learning so much good information here because it's like, I do talk to other tuners, but they're like, I don't want to tell you too much. But like, you're literally answering things that I've always theoretically were thinking, or I've heard people talk about. And I'm like, all right, but is it true?
There's only a few things I won't talk about. And like one of them is, I'm not going to tell you how I get my launch control to work. But I am one of the few guys, AMS, Racebox, we all have a properly working launch control. And I know a lot of guys still have trouble figuring it out. The only reason I won't share it is because it was 379 revisions just on launch control to make it work. I mean, we're talking from October to February, 7 days a week. I didn't shower for some days. I was so stressed out getting this car to launch, and I just could not figure it out. And one night I was at my friend's house, and I said, "Oh, I had like a small idea." I go out to the car in the middle of the night. I load the tune in. I wasn't even expecting it to work. I'm like, here we go. Just try number 380, and on the way home, I tried it. I almost cried. The car took
Oh
off
my
like a rocket,
God.
because a lot of these guys complain about when you go to launch your car, the car will
Yeah.
hesitate and then it takes off.
Yes.
And there's a very specific reason why that happens. And if I have to suffer, then these other guys will have to suffer as well,
Have to suffer too. That's it. Oh
Yeah,
my God.
What's actually funny though is talking about your tuner, Hussein.
Yeah.
When I first started, I was watching everybody. I wanted to see who was good, who wasn't, who I had to look out for. And he was the one guy that made me nervous. I saw a couple of his logs, and again, looking at data, he just knew his shit. And I'm like, damn. I'm like, every time I think I got something I'm going to bring to the table, I look at his log and he's already done it. I'm like, so, this is going to be a little tricky. And one day we ended up we ended up talking to feel each other out. And now, honestly, I talk to him more than I talk to my family. We talk every day. I mean, he's such a good dude. The kid is an absolute genius when it comes to these cars,
Oh my God. I freaking love it, man. I
Yeah,
love it.
he's a smart dude. And I don't want to get into those tuner battles. Leave me out of them. Sometimes they're online. Everyone's going here and going there.
Mhm.
I don't like the competitive stuff. I like to get along with everybody, and he was the one guy that made me a little nervous just because, I mean, he knew his shit, and it's just funny how things work, and now he's one of my good friends, and we actually share secrets with each other all the time, and it's just funny how things work like that,
I freaking love it. All right, let me see. Another question. Do you think these cars is it beneficial going with a wider exhaust? Because most aftermarket exhaust is 2.5 inch.
Yep.
But there's a couple companies that make 3 inch, such as the one I work with,
Yeah.
AM Competition. So do you think these cars are really beneficial for larger catbacks?
Stock turbos, 2.5 to 3 inches fine.
Mhm.
Bigger turbos, 3 inch all the way. Excuse me, 3 inch all the way when you're trying to push some power. But again, for a daily driver, I had 2.5 inch lower downpipes and a 2.5 inch Concept Z Performance exhaust.
Mhm.
And I loved the way the car was. Once I put the
Mhm.
full 3 inch downpipes on the car, I absolutely hated it after that.
Okay, okay. Here's another one.
Yep.
Common. Ready? Intakes. This one is definitely argued between different tuners. I've had one tuner say yes, I had another tuner say no. In your experience, intakes. And when I'll put an asterisk saying closed box, such as Z1 AMS and AAM competition, versus the regular open air filter ones. Which one do you think? Or stock, whichever, your experience.
So all of the intakes seem pretty close.
Mhm.
Until we're talking about the long ram, the ones that stick in the front bumper.
Okay.
Going solely off data. Now, I don't care about horsepower numbers. I don't care, whatever. The data doesn't lie. And I noticed that with the companies that are making the newer intakes, the ones that go into the front bumper, the long ones, the cold air intakes, they take a lot more fuel mid-range and down low than the, sorry, puppy. They take a lot more fuel mid-range and down low than the in-engine bay intakes.
Why would
I
you think
personally
so?
run, say again?
Why do you think so? Is because if you have to add more fuel, I would assume there's more airflow.
Well, think of it this way: as air cools down, or air, how when air gets hotter, it expands, and when air
Yes.
cools down, it contracts or it condenses. Well, when you
Yes.
have colder air entering the pipes, they can travel through the pipes a lot faster, being that they're colder.
Mhm.
So, you have instead of engine bay hot air coming in, and again, we're talking, like I said, with the VQ37s, down low driving around town. That's where you notice it, because the air isn't traveling that fast. It has enough time to heat up as it
Mm.
goes from the engine bay, into the turbos. But when you have like the front intakes, the air charge is a lot cooler coming in, so it's able to travel through the pipes a lot faster, and you get more air. You get more air content going into the engine. You have more air going into the engine because it's colder versus the in-engine bay intakes.
Okay. So pretty much you just have more oxygen, more cooler oxygen going in.
Yeah, yep. I mean,
Okay.
again,
Is
once you're doing
mhm,
100 plus, it all really doesn't matter as long as
they're
you're on
all the
stock.
same.
Yeah, I
Okay.
mean, AMS is great. The BMS inlets are great. The still in one. I mean, they're all pretty close.
Okay. All right. I'm glad. Yeah, you actually talked about heat exchangers a little bit earlier. I would definitely all over the place, but you were talking about heat
Yeah,
exchangers,
yeah.
and you was talking about how with E85, you can actually just you don't really have to upgrade your cooling system. But in your honest opinion, um, should a person really go and upgrade to like let's say a full AMS race heat exchanger, fender tank? I had that something similar to like that, or even some people run like a killer chiller, inner
Yep.
chiller setup
Those do
like
work
that.
really well.
Okay, so
Um,
you would recommend
when it
those for
comes
like
to
Go ahead.
when it comes to being specific about companies, I tend to keep my opinions to myself, just because companies are trying to make money, and I would never try to stop that.
Mhm,
Like I was saying before, though, when you're running E85, E30, E50, E60, the smaller AMS intercooler or heat exchanger would be all you need.
okay.
I On my personal car, I'd be fully confident with the BM. I have a BMS cooler on my car,
Mhm,
and it was just because I wanted the smaller cooler.
mhm,
Um, it doesn't hinder flow to the radiator, where I've heard a couple of the bigger heat exchangers do kind of slow the air down.
mhm,
And when running ethanol, you don't rely on the intercoolers as much as when you're running regular gasoline, just because again,
mm.
um, the E85 will, as it evaporates, it does pull the heat out of the air itself, and it kind of works as its own intercooler, like a chemical intercooler in a sense.
So, in your opinion, right, as a
Yep.
tuner, do you think that's why most of, but pretty much all the fastest VR30s are still on stock air to water intercoolers?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, absolutely. Running the E85 is what's cooling down the intake charge a lot more than those intercoolers are. You
Okay.
know, um, it's kind of like running methanol. You can run methanol and you can actually remove the intercoolers and you won't notice any different. You won't notice any loss in power. And it's very
Yeah.
similar with the E85. Um,
So, so even better. I know this is the hot new thing for late 2021, early 2022. Air to air. I don't know if you have the experience of testing one out or you have any information, but just theoretically from tuning cars, would you recommend that over air to water?
Theoretically, no, but on this car specifically, yes. The air to water intercoolers on these cars are like, we're talking full drag race cars that have like the legit air to water intercoolers where you can put ice in them, and the
Mm-hmm.
intercooler isn't sitting on top of the hot engine.
Mm-hmm.
No, air to water will always be a better setup. It always transfers heat a lot better than air to air. But on
Mm-hmm.
this car specifically, due to the compactness and how everything is so tight and the heat soak that these cars give, the theoretically, again, I haven't personally tested one yet. I'm sure I will at some
Mm-hmm.
point. But the air to air coolers on this car specifically probably will flow a lot better or cool a lot better,
Okay.
just because the
Yeah.
core is a lot bigger.
Mhm.
The core itself isn't sitting on top of the engine.
So it doesn't have the radiant heat.
Exactly. And again, when you're going 100 plus miles an hour, the air is moving so fast that it doesn't have time to get heat soaked from the engine bay, because it's passing the intercooler and it's in the engine before you know it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Ooh, all right. Now, if you were, in your opinion, if you were gonna help somebody build a 10-second VR30, what will be some of your recommendations? You don't have to give out brands,
No, it's okay.
but your recommendations, a 10-second full interior Q50 Q60 VR30. Shoot.
Well, I have a customer right now that went 1097 or 1096, one of those, with 2.5 inch downpipes and cutouts. It's not hard, and we're talking less than 20 pounds of boost. I think she peaked at 20 pounds of boost in fourth gear.
Mm,
Um, the biggest thing is with these cars is like the launch, the setup, the wheels, the tires. I would say if you want like a nice, reliable, and again, I keep saying this, it's just my opinion. I would start with the basics: flex
mm,
fuel, high pressure fuel pump, low pressure fuel pump. Can it be done without some of that stuff? Yes, but we're talking reliably.
mm,
Her car ran tens and she drives it every day still, and she's still on the same turbo, same engines, same engine. And she's not, she didn't pop the engine right after her run. And she ran a
mm-hmm.
couple of 10-second passes.
Okay.
But I would say E60 minimum,
Mm-hmm.
a basic, heat exchanger like a BMS, something small. or anyone you want really, doesn't really matter. Just some sort of heat exchanger.
Mhm.
No blow off valves. Intakes,
Okay.
full. I would do a 3-inch exhaust. Again, this is for tens. Catless in that case, or we can definitely do it with catted 3-inch, which would be my preference. But you can do it easier, obviously, with the higher flowing exhaust.
Mhm.
It's really not much. It's a lot of it's in the tune. A lot of it's in the way the person drives.
Mhm.
Lightweight wheels make a very big difference.
Oh yeah.
Um, the non-sport brakes, believe it or not, make a massive difference.
Oh
If you're
yeah.
trying to run tens, and I've had a couple of customers say, "Hey, I want a 10-second car," and they have a Lux and they want to upgrade to the bigger brakes. I say, "Don't do it.
Nope.
Do not do it. The rotational
Rotational
mass
mass.
is
Mhm.
massive. I think it's like every 1 pound is equal to 7 pounds of stationary, a weight. The drive shaft's a big one. You lose a
Mm.
lot of power through the joint on the two-piece drive shaft, as well as
Yeah.
being very, very heavy. And you get a lot of deflection on it. So it twists a lot, when you put a nice, like an AMS drive shaft in the car, or some sort of aluminum or carbon fiber drive shaft, the power transfer, it's a lot
It's
less
a lot
power
better.
loss, but you get a lot better power transfer to the actual wheels.
Mm.
Um, Other than that, I mean, it's like I said, it's not much. Um, the stuff like taking the seats out does help quite a bit. Running the car
Mhm.
a little low on fuel, so you're not, just getting the car as light as
Yeah,
possible
dropping the
without,
weight.
yeah, without tearing it apart. But it's very doable with a full weight interior car, just with the mods I mentioned, and with a decent tune. You know, um, yeah, that's
Okay.
pretty much
Okay.
it.
And now, if someone wanted to go with pure turbos, right?
Yep,
Stage twos, of course.
yep.
Um, would you recommend still running it on stock injectors or going with upgraded
No,
ones?
upgraded,
Just
upgraded.
upgrade, just past that.
You need the whole thing. Can you get away with it? Maybe not. Honestly, no. My first ever dyno with a pure stage 2 car, first pass. Period. I didn't know what the car. We were hoping to make 500 horsepower, and the car made 598 to the wheels. I'm like, oh, well, that would have wiped out stock injectors. It wouldn't even have made it on stock injectors. Um, when going pure stage 2s, absolutely recommended to do a full fuel system. You can never have too much fuel. You know what I'm saying?
Mhm. You can also overkill.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you don't. And again, it's just I look at things a little bit differently. I always try
Mm,
to keep let's say a DW injector. I try to keep them off of stock turbo cars, but it's one of
mhm.
the first things I say to go with when you're doing the big turbos. Because when you do something like switching to injectors, people don't realize you do trade off some drivability down low. When you put a massive injector on these things, they have a minimum pulse width, so like a minimum amount of fuel that they can spray into the
Or
engine.
flow rate or something like that?
Yeah, the flow rate is
Okay.
so high that they have trouble idling sometimes. And that's because you have like
Mm.
these garden hoses trying to spray a small amount of fuel. You
Yeah.
know what I'm saying? And it can't atomize the fuel properly. So, a lot of guys will tell you, like cold E85 startups on these things are brutal. Whether it be a GTR, whether it be the VR30, any type of big injector, ethanol based car always has
Mhm.
startup issues. They run a little funky as they, kind of they have to kind of come alive. But it's definitely recommended. I personally wouldn't tune a pure stage 2 car without injectors
Okay.
or
Okay.
ethanol. I don't know if you saw a write up that I did recently, or not recently, a couple months ago, talking about people with pure stage 2s running pump gas. Would never recommend doing that. The turbos just aren't meant for pump gas. I don't know if you do you have
You
what do you
mean
have for your
pump gas as in E85 or 91,
91 or
93?
90 or 93?
Okay, cool.
The problem with running pure stage 2 cars on, let's say, a 91 or 93 octane fuel is the timing. And as we know, or we might not know, but when you're running big turbos like that and on pump gas, the timing has to be very, very low, and that's to keep the engine
Mhm.
alive. Well, the byproduct of low timing is high heat. And
Mhm.
we all know that heat will help spool turbos, but sometimes too much heat isn't a good thing. And what
Mhm.
people notice when they go to pure stage 2 cars, whether it's tuned by me, tuned by Hussein, tuned by, Martin, they all complain about the same thing. The car is dog
Mhm.
slow, down
Mhm.
low, and then it always ends up over boosting up top. And the
Mm.
reason that is because the timing again is so low that you can open the wastegates all the way, fully wide open, and these things will still overshoot 20 pounds of boost by red line, and they keep climbing. Part of the reason why that is because you're trying to stuff a massive turbo inside a small housing. And one of the things that I don't know if they just couldn't do it or they just never did it, but the wastegate port is too small. So what
Okay.
happens is, when you have really high heat in your engine, again, from low timing, your EGTs will be through the roof. You can't get all that air past the turbo through the wastegate port out in the exhaust. It's just there's too much velocity, there's too much air. You know what I mean? So what happens is, again, you have to keep it lazy down low, and by 4,000, 3,000, 4,000 RPMs, the wastegates are fully open, and they just take off. And then as soon as you put ethanol in the car and you can start raising the timing up in the teens to lower 20s,
okay,
they're beautiful. It's a completely different car. They spool faster because, again, when you have more timing, you actually have to close the wastegate more because now there's not enough heat. And I'm not sure if you know how like retarding and advancing timing works. So,
okay, you could break down this part slightly.
So when you retard the timing, you basically fire the spark plug later on.
Oh yes, okay. Now I know what you're talking about. Yes, I know that. I know what you're talking about.
So what ends up happening is when you fire the spark plug later on, it's too close to when the exhaust valve opens. So now you have that flame that is in the middle of burning, all that extra heat, and it's going out of the exhaust into the turbos.
Yeah.
And that's
so you're actually losing power.
You're losing power, but you're also creating a ton of heat. But you're doing that for safety reasons. When you advance the timing, you light the spark plug off sooner. And by the time the exhaust valve opens up, the actual combustion has had more time to cool down. So now you have cooler air coming out of the turbo or coming out of the exhaust valve. So it will actually cause you to need to close the wastegates a little more to keep that heat and velocity up. If that makes sense. I think I'm explaining that properly.
Yes, I definitely understand. You broke it down for me. If I got it, everyone else should.
Yeah. So when you're on pump gas, you have to open the wastegates all the way. Like 8 millimeters is as far as they open. They don't go any higher than that. And some guys will tell you, it's the tune. It's not the tune. You open those wastegates to 8. That's it. That's as high as they go. On stock turbos, you'd make no boost, but because these things flow so much air and all that heat from the timing, you're going to end up making too much boost. And they usually overshoot quite a bit, especially if you have like a full 3-inch exhaust. The higher flowing your exhaust is, the same thing. It aids in turbo speeding up. Kind of like when people tell you when you put lower downpipes on the car or full downpipes, you have to get the car tuned because people overboost. All that exhaust flowing out of the engine that fast helps the turbo spool up a lot faster. And it ends up hurting you when you're having a pure stage 2 car on pump gas.
Okay. All right. So, man, that was some great information.
Yeah.
You're teaching me, man. You're teaching me. All right. All right, so knowing that the Z is coming out, right? And I know that you're trying to get ramped up and want to tune one of these things.
That's why I got into the VR30.
Yeah, and we have a couple of heavy hitters out here, such as Deli Q50, Boost Fiend, and other just fast Q50, Q60s out here. Where do you see this platform really heading?
Straight up,
honestly,
I think that the Z is going to put the VR30 on the map. The Q cars are great. My tuning style for the Q is a lot different than it's going to be for the Z. I am an extremely conservative tuner. All my guys know I'm not chasing records. I mean, if you just look at my numbers, I don't care about breaking horsepower records. I don't care about, going to the track and I just want my customers to have a car that's going to last, that they can enjoy, and that they can drive to and from work every day and then go beat up on a Mustang every once in a while if they feel like it. When it comes to the Z, I'm going to break some shit. This car is going to be an absolute monster. And my tuning style is going to change quite a bit when this car comes out to see if we can set some sort of record, see if we can break we're going to break a bunch of eggs, I guess you can say. But it's in a platform that is more suitable for the power. It's a lot lighter. It's a lot smaller. Being that it's going to be rear wheel drive, obviously you have the rear wheel drive Qs, but in my opinion, the Q cars just aren't meant for this kind of power. Everyone asks me, hey, what would you max these cars out at? Me personally, I wouldn't take the Q car over 650 horsepower. I mean, there are guys like Mikhail making, 800, 900, whatever. I'm not sure what he's making. I don't want to put the number out there. It will support it. But, you have a car making.
It's just not designed for it.
It's not designed for it. And proof is in the numbers. If AMS can't run an 8, I'm sorry, but nobody can. They have an unlimited budget. They have the smartest guys around, There's a reason why these cars aren't going 8s. And it's not because people just can't do it. It's not because people don't have the money. It's because the car itself just isn't capable of doing that. It's going to get to the point where you get guys making 1,000 horsepower, and you're going to start finding other weak links. Transfer cases, differentials, axles. Obviously, drive shafts are already breaking. And the car's it's just not meant to handle that kind of power.
I do gotta sit there defend the Q50 though. Comparing it to other high horsepower cars, it's taking a pretty good beating. I must say, I think it's honestly taking a pretty good beating for where it's at with pure turbos. I think that's
Yep.
pretty good.
Yeah, I
But yeah,
mean,
but that you're looking
but
at
they don't
seven,
perform.
800,
But
huh?
they don't perform. Look at what
Yeah,
Mikhail had to do to run nines. I think he's the only guy running nines right now, right?
yeah, he's running nines now, but he's still on a conservative. AMS is probably pulling it back a little bit, but yeah, you're right. He's making like his numbers should be somewhere around 850, 860 will.
Yeah, that's on a proper that on a Z car is an 8-second car, or a low 9-second car. You're going to find that these Z's are going to be running 10s on stock turbos.
Yes,
the same way that the Q is running mid 11s.
yes.
I don't see why those cars won't run mid to low 10s on stock turbos with a full build setup, just because of the chassis, just because of the design of the car, just because of it's just a better car for racing, in my opinion.
Okay, that's actually going to be super dope.
Yeah, it's gonna be a good car.
Let me see what else I can add. What are the other common things with the VR30? Because you answered like almost every one of my questions I would think about
Oil.
when it comes to this freaking platform. Like you was just A1.
Thanks, buddy.
Jesus Christ.
Can
Wow.
we talk? Can we talk about oil?
Oh yes, jump into oil. So you can correct people because I say my shit theoretically, but I also listen to oil
Of
analysis guys
course.
from Amsoil. So you give your opinion. Yeah, go ahead.
So I think one of the biggest killers of this engine is the oil that comes from the factory.
Mm-hmm.
I was there for the release of, like, as a master technician, when you become a master tech through Infiniti or Nissan, you have to actually go to the launch of the newer engines whenever something new comes out. So I was down in New Jersey when this engine came out. I was one of the first guys to see it before it was even on the lots. We had to learn how to take them apart. We had to learn all the basic stuff about them. And one of the things the guy said right off the bat, 0W20 is meant to meet EPA standards. It has nothing to do with performance. You could drink that stuff and it wouldn't kill you. It's so thin. It's one of the biggest reasons that these cars blow up stock even, it's just too thin. And people will tell you, oh, well, don't run 5W30 or 40 in cold climate. It's 19 degrees out right now, and I run 5W40 all year round. I'd go thicker if I could, but 5W40
Yeah, you don't know the clearance. You don't know the clearance yet. Oh wait, you know the clearance, but I don't think 50 will be. I don't know.
5W40, 5W30 to 5W40 is where I would keep it.
Okay.
In down south, I wouldn't run any. And this, again, this is just me, my own personal car. I would not run anything less than 5W40. Up north, you can get away with 530. I personally run 540, and I actually was adding a little bit of Lucas additive to help keep my turbos from smoking when I had the full downpipes on the car, and it helped a lot. It's, again, one of the reasons why these turbos smoke so bad. The oil literally turns into water. I mean, it's almost water when it's cold, but a lot of guys will tell you on the forums, don't run 5W40. It's too thick. First of all, the first number is the thickness measured when it's cold.
Number,
and the second number is measured when it's hot. And the 40 is a lot thinner than the 5 when it's cold. It doesn't make sense because the number, you would think that, hey, 40, it must be thicker, but the oil doesn't thicken up when it gets hot. It still thins out. It just doesn't get as thin as, let's say, 0W20. I would literally, I would never run 0W20 in one of these cars, period. I make my mother, go ahead.
Yeah, usually what I tell people on my channel, or if I don't even be on the forums anymore on Facebook because it's like, he's the YouTube guy, fuck him. But usually I watch like Amsoil and all these other big companies, and they talk about oil pressure versus oil temperature. And when I first got this car, as much as people trash JB4, it was one of the best ways of me paying attention to certain parameters. And I kept on noticing that the oil temperature would get really hot. And from learning information, I'm like, 020 is not going to be it.
It's
So
not.
I immediately just went to 030, and I tried 040 one time, but I didn't have enough theoretical information. I didn't sign up for an oil analysis, so I just stick with 030 because I'm north.
Of course.
But there was a lot of other YouTubers or these companies who tested it out, and oil pressure dropped with 0 to 20. It was literally like nothing. And all the guys I know on this platform that were pushing a lot of horsepower were like, yeah, I'm running 0 to 30. And then their motors went. They blew a lot, they blew their turbo seals. And I'm like, guys, I think it was your oil. Boost, you don't know what you're talking about. Shut up. And I'm like, all right, I don't.
You're
Because I'm
not
not,
wrong, though. You're not wrong.
you know what I'm
It's
saying?
honestly, like I said, oil is one of the biggest killers of these engines. The running too thin of an oil. I actually, it's kind of funny, not funny, but I had 2 customers in the past 2 months, about to be customers, that were coming to me, and
Mhm.
literally right before I tuned them, they blew up, and they're like, I don't understand. They're like, what happened? I'm like, well, we haven't tuned your car yet. It's like, what are you running for oil? You know, and they're like, well, I don't understand. I was just driving the car like normal, and the car just let go. You know, and everyone, both of them running 0W20. You ask, if you were to get like some sort of spreadsheet on blown engines and the oil they're running, I'll guarantee you 99% of the guys that have blown engines on this platform were running too thin of an oil.
Isn't that like a common thing? Usually, Infiniti or Nissan will look at when a motor comes in on the warranty work. They will want to see what kind of oil they were running, or no?
They care more about that number for the EPA.
Okay.
So they would risk rebuilding a couple of engines or replacing a couple of motors just to be able to say, hey, the fuel mileage is 29 versus
Yeah.
23.
They did it for
You know what I mean?
economy.
Because you will lose fuel economy when going to a thicker oil, but what you lose in the economy, you gain in safety. You know,
Okay.
and so like when my customers come to me, one of the first things I tell them, immediately switch to at least 5W30 if you're not comfortable at 540, and get the QX80 oil filter.
Okay.
Now, it doesn't matter if you're running the VQ37 or the VR30, VR30, it doesn't matter. The V8 oil filter is the exact same oil filter, but it's just longer, so it has more filtering capacity.
What I usually
Stay,
tell people
go
to
ahead.
do is I use a GTR filter because, like I
Yeah,
say, it's a little taller. I use that
that's the
one.
same one. That's the same filter. Same exact
Okay.
filter. Do not run aftermarket oil filters.
Mm.
OEM is the best oil filter you can ever run in any vehicle. The reason why I say that is because think about the factory. You know, they want to minimize failures. So one of the most important things they look at is oil filter quality. You know, when you switch to Fram and K&N and all those things, you actually lose quality versus OEM. OEM always has the best oil filters for any manufacturer just because they've done more testing than any one of us will ever understand, and they pick those filters for a reason.
From what I remember with the oil filters, just it's been a while since I've been in this community.
Yeah.
I noticed like a flow rate per hour or per minute, and I realized some different oil filters they don't really disclose the information. But if you go searching for it, you'll find it. And some of the cheaper ones they don't flow well at all.
Yeah.
So I
It's
agree with you.
again, yeah, like I said, it just the factory knows more than all of us. You know, the reason why they put the thin oil in it is it has nothing to do with performance. You know, it's fuel economy, but the filters, I would never run anything other than an OEM filter in the 3.7 or the 3.0, and it's always the same filter, the GTR or the V8 filter. I have a part number that I just give to every one of my customers whenever they ask which one to go with.
Okay. All
Yep.
right. Let me
And again, just one last thing on that.
go ahead. Go ahead. Go
10,
ahead.
the 10,000 mile interval, hell no. No,
Yes.
you're basically filling the engine with water, the 0W20, and then you're asking it to go 10,000 miles. Now, what people don't understand is like, well, but it's synthetic. The synthetic portion of it doesn't matter. Basically, the difference between synthetic and non-synthetic is the non-synthetic oil will eventually break down from heat cycles. You know, you get thermal breakdown, whereas the synthetic stuff is a lot less prone to thermal breakdown. Um,
Uh-huh.
but you have to look at oil itself also as a filter.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason oil turns black is because it's trapping all those particles and it's cleaning the
Mm-hmm.
cylinder walls and cleaning everything out of the engine. So over time, just like a sponge, it gets clogged. And now
Mm-hmm.
you're running black, dirty oil through your engine, and you're wondering why you're wiping out bearings. You're wondering why you're scoring cylinder walls. You know,
Okay.
um, on a modded car, 3,000 to 5,000 max. I would say 5,000 max on a stock car, and 3,000 if you're going to be beating the crap out of these things.
Jesus Christ. You know, it's kind of weird knowing I was right. It's this literally because I was telling people years ago, I said 10,000 miles on 0 to 20 just doesn't sound right.
They
Like,
do that for convenience because they want you to say, oh, because we all know regular customers who aren't into performance, they don't want to go to the dealership. Nobody wants to sit at a dealership for an hour and a half,
yeah, for
you
a
know,
couple
every
hours.
3,000 miles. So they did that again. It wasn't a longevity key. It was to make customers happy at the expense of, the
You're
motors
losing
or
motors.
the engine's not lasting as long, and they know that. They know that, but again, they just want the more people that buy these engines. They make so much money from everything they sell. The idea is to get as much metal moving as possible. And when you see, Infiniti has to go 5,000, but Audi can go 10. They're like, well, I'm just gonna go to Audi just because I can go to the dealership less. And literally, people will pick one car over the other based on that. So Infiniti's like, oh, let's do it too. We'll lose a few motors, but we'll move a lot more metal.
Okay.
But 10,000 miles is not even on a bone stock car. My mother has a Q50, and if I caught her going over 5,000 miles, I would just take the car from her. So.
Okay. I think one of my last questions is this, right? Because you said that you were a technician and then you were a service manager and stuff like that, right?
Yep.
So I always say this little joke or analogy. I say, don't go home with the condom on if you're cheating, cheating on your partner. And as a person that worked out there, I know you see it. What is your recommendation? I mean, I don't know if you still work with them or not, but what is your recommendation with going home with the parts on, if you know what I mean?
What do you mean by going home with the parts on?
Let's say I pop my motor,
Yep.
transmission issue, popped an injector, and I go back to the dealership. I'm like, hey, here's my fully modified E85 car, warranty it.
Okay, here's my recommendation. Unless you know the dealership, bring the car back stock. I can't tell you how many times I've told customers, and none of mine, because I have, like I said, very good luck up to this point. But when the day comes, which it's going to happen, I'm going to blow somebody's car up. It's just going to happen. I tell them, put the car all the way back to stock and bring it to the dealership, load the stock tune back in, because some dealerships are not mod friendly. I don't want to give away, I don't want to get any dealerships in trouble. I don't want to give away any of,
I know, I understand.
But, because, Infiniti, Nissan, they do look at this stuff. The one thing I'll tell you is if you don't know the dealership and you don't feel comfortable, put the car back to stock. You are more likely to have your warranty denied with having downpipes on the car than you would a tune. And only because, you can put the tune back to stock, and now EXHUAST has phone flash. So what I do when I tune my customers is I give them a copy of their stock tune that's available on the cloud 24/7. So I say, you're going to get an oil change, you're going to the dealership, put the stock tune back in, bring the car in, get the work done, put the other tune back on the car. If they are tipped off and they see something, so let's say that you bring your car fully modded and your engine is blown, right?
Yeah.
Well, sometimes the technician has to take pictures for Infiniti. There's no way around it. If the technician has to take a video, and sometimes we've had those situations where we have to be in the car with a video, record, get out of the car, record the VIN number in a single video on the door, and then walk around to the engine and then look into the engine bay. And that isn't the dealership. Yeah, and you don't, and again, no manager, no dealership is going to put themselves at risk to commit fraud. It's just not going to happen. Exactly. But you bring the car in bone stock, and there's something wrong with the car. Can it happen? Yes, but the likelihood of them investigating why something broke, is slim to none. One thing they do look for, and I'll tell you this as an absolute fact: if you pop your motor, pull the spark plugs before you bring it. Even if you put the car back to stock, pull every spark plug and find, it's usually number 4, replace the broken spark plug. When a dealership gets a car, even if it's bone stock and they pull a plug and it's missing the tip, they know exactly why that happened. That didn't happen because of bad luck. That wasn't a random warrantyable failure. That's too much boost or too much timing, and you had a pretty massive detonation event inside that cylinder, which broke the spark plug and broke the tip off. So I tell everybody, you pop your motor, it starts running funky, always pull the plugs and check them before you bring them to the dealership. Being lazy can cost you a lot of money.
Whew. Shit. How much those motors cost to replace? Like 10,000?
About 20 grand, I think, total for a brand new factory motor with everything, with labor and everything. Yep.
Jesus Christ. Wow.
Yeah.
That's the price of the car now. Wow, man, you actually gave some information, because I've had so many people who ask me that, and I say, listen, if you're going to cheat, don't go home with the evidence.
Literally, it's like taking, like you said, it's like pulling it off. It's still there. It's like, now they're going to investigate. If you go home and you're not wearing it, there's no,
Yeah.
and you know what I'm saying? It's like, you can't be lazy. You're modifying the car. You're doing what you're not supposed to be doing. If something happens, just put it back to stock. It's simple. That's why I tell people don't sell your mods. And people, oh, it's so much work. Okay, well, risk
Okay.
it. And when you get denied warranty, that's on you, because then you're gonna wish you
Yeah.
put it back to stock, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So
Okay. I think that's almost all the questions. Is there
perfect.
anything you would like to add in just your own personal opinion on tuning these cars from VQs to VR30s? You know, in your honest opinion, this is probably my last question.
Yeah, no.
Because you technically kind of seen it, but you said you haven't too much turbo VQ, so I don't know if you have the experience. But I mean, in your honest opinion, if you had to get a 3.7 Q50 and supercharge it, or rear mounted turbo, or single turbo, versus upgraded turbo VR30, which one would you, in your experience, in your opinion, would be better?
Faster or better?
I, I would say I can't. I
The
don't know. I don't know.
a
I think.
boosted 3.7 is always going to be faster.
Okay.
It's a high compression engine that makes a lot of power from the factory without boost. And when you add boost, even a little bit of boost to a high compression engine, they make very serious power increases. And again, this is, I have experience with supercharging, turbocharging other vehicles, just not specifically the 3.7.
Mhm.
Corvettes, and for instance, you take a high compression engine, you add, so my car, my 350Z, I had the 6 liter in it. 7 pounds of boost. The car made 733 horsepower. I'm sorry, 9 pounds of boost.
Right.
And it went 10.8 at 140 miles an hour in 103-degree weather on pump gas. And I got 33 miles to the
Those
gallon on the
trap
way to the,
speeds are good and definitely good enough for nines.
well, I let off because again, it was stock suspension. I just wanted to see what the
Oh,
car
you
would
didn't
do.
want to get kicked off the track.
And I did anyways. I was trying to go slow, got kicked off anyways. So
Um,
I had like a 2060 foot. It's actually on YouTube, on one of my old YouTube channels. But I spun, I got out of it, I got back in it, and the car still went 10.8 at 140. When it comes to the 3.7s, they just make power. You make serious power with a little amount of boost. But when it comes to which one's better, the 3.0 is it's suited for boost. It's got lower compression, it's got stronger internals, it's got, it's built for boost specifically, so it will last a little bit longer.
all right.
But
All
yeah, but
right.
performance wise, no doubt the 3.7, you have more displacement, so you can put bigger turbos on it, you can spool them sooner, and you can run less boost to make more horsepower.
Oh, right. Yes, yes,
Yep.
yes. I think that's all the questions that I have for you, man.
Sweet.
Wow, this has been very freaking informative. Like, you don't understand. I'm very thankful because it's really good to actually get like ask a tuner
Yep.
and just to spitball and just know about these specific information that you just may want and need. So, is there anything else you want to add as your own personal, thing that you want to speak about on? And then we're gonna tap out, man.
Yeah, I say just lastly, like I see a lot of the cars aren't reliable. I see a lot of posts where people are talking, oh, the VR30 is terrible, the 3.7 versus the 3.0. An engine's an engine. If you take care of it, if you have good luck, and you do things right, it's going to last.
Hmm.
As with anything, you have to understand that, and people who are listening, that when you're on a forum, you're specifically listening to people who have problems. Nobody,
Yes.
if everybody that was in the forum every day talked about their cars running well, there would be no room for any of the problems. But again, when you're a technician or when you're on the forums, nobody's going to come online and say, hey guys, just so you know, my car made it 10,000 miles, no problem. Nobody gives a shit. But when someone says, hey, I just blew my turbo, or I blew this, or I blew that, my car sucks, you get all those people that are complaining because they have problems. But a lot of times the customer or the people complaining aren't telling you that they're bouncing off the rev limiter, they're doing
Mm-hmm.
donuts in a parking lot, they haven't
Yep.
changed their oil in 8,000 miles, they're running the wrong oil, their bad gas is a very, very, very big
California.
problem. Yes, and I'm sorry I forgot to talk about that earlier, maybe another time, but
You could add it if you want to. I have no problem.
gas quality is just as important as oil quality.
Okay.
I'd say probably the second biggest reason that these cars blow up is from bad gas. I tell my customers, I educate my customers a lot. I have a private chat. We talk almost every day. We bullshit all day long. I give them tips and tricks pretty much when they come to my mind. One thing I tell them, that pick a gas station that you're comfortable with and watch your data logs. If you notice one day that, because a lot of customers say, hey, my car's knocking all of a sudden, what happened? Well, what'd you do? Well, I went to a different gas station. Okay, go back to the old one. Hey, the knock is gone. Well, that gas station probably has shitty gas. And it doesn't matter if it's a Mobile, doesn't matter if it's a Sunoco, Costco. You have to factor in things like tank quality, tank age, what kind of gas they're getting, where they're getting it from. And if you go from one gas station to a really bad gas station that has, let's say, water in the tank, and then you put 600 horsepower to that fuel, you're going to blow the car up. And that's not your fault. That's not the tuner's fault. That's that luck thing. It's just you put shit gas in the car, and your margin of error as you increase horsepower, the more power you make, the smaller that margin of error, becomes. So you put bad gas in a stock car, it can handle it. But you put bad gas in a pure stage 2 car, that first run, you're popping the motor. And I've known people that have done that with other tuners, and I've actually defended tuners that I don't even know, because I told them, why would you put that gas in there? You're getting 5, 6, 7 degrees of knock on your log. You should have cut the run. Oh, well, I just figured, you just figured that you have a new motor now, So gas is very important. So anybody who is tuned, even not tuned, but anybody with an EXHUAST app, if you go to a different gas station, one that you're not familiar with or one that's not normal to you, always watch your knock count. And if you notice that out of nowhere you're getting a ton of knock, it's the gas. Just drive the car until you run down to E, go fill it up at your old place, check it again. I'll guarantee you the knock will be almost completely eliminated. Yeah.
Thank you, man. Thank you. That,
yeah, buddy.
Wow. I did. I swear it was another thing, because I still feel like I know I have other questions, but I just know they're adding more stuff to the platform as the days goes, as the years go, and I think 2022 is going to be a really good year for the VR30 platform. Like you said, it's been out since 2016, and you've got to see it before then, and it's definitely grown. I really hope that in the future they do maybe like revise it, but I don't. Maybe they might.
The Z is going to be the Z is going to be a revision. The Z honestly is going to do more for this platform than in the next year than all the years combined up to this point. You have a car that's starting at $30,000, and you have a bunch of kids that are going to want to be getting into this car. So all the companies are going to be scrambling to make parts for it, a lot more so than the Q. Because honestly, the market for the Q isn't as big as you think. It's a sedan, it's a 2-door coupe, it's a big coupe, it's a luxury coupe, and then you have the 4-door sedan. The market isn't as big as, obviously we have our forums where everybody is all about the specific car, but like the Z cars, it's not even a hold candle. EXHUAST will tell you that their biggest seller for ECU licenses is the 3.7. And as soon as that Z comes out, you have a car now that's much cheaper than the Q. It's cooler, so kids are going to have it. Has a 6-speed. You know what I mean? Like it's going to change the game.
9-speed.
I'm getting the 9-speed. I'm definitely getting the 9-speed, but that 6-speed is going to be a fan favorite for people. And it's going to change the way that this engine. People are going to come out with a lot more things as far as engine builds, engine parts, things that will trickle down to the Q cars. So the guys with the Qs will benefit from the Z coming out. Absolutely.
I love this. I love this. So everyone that's watching, I'm going to put all his information down to Sonic Tune. I appreciate you so much, Mark. Listen, you
anytime.
were super informative. You're the first tuner that sat down and talked with me about different things and just answer all my questions. And I think this was a great start to bring the boost, especially with bringing a tuner on board and just getting those information, those common questions out, man. You've taught me so much just on this live, and anyone who chooses to watch this whenever I drop this, they're going to learn a lot more too. Thank you so much, Mark.
Awesome.
For the
Anytime.
help in the community. So much. And, you can drop whatever you want to drop and say what you want to say with any, your IG or whatever. You just go ahead.
It's all Sonic. It's all Sonic tuned. Drop the links. I have my website. I have my Instagram, and then I have my Facebook page. That's pretty much it. Everything's on there.
Based out of where again? Just in case, some people like to know we're close.
Connecticut.
So Connecticut. Okay, so Northeast. So we have a local Northeast EXHUAST or ECU-Tech tuner, which is actually pretty dope. So you guys can definitely tap in with him. I know a couple people definitely tune with you already, so I was like, definitely got to get in a conversation with him too. So outside that, guys, this was great. We're gonna keep doing things like this. We're gonna keep moving forward. I guys want you to contact Mark. You got to actually hear him speak and talk about these things, and I realize it makes people feel a lot more comfortable when they actually get to know the person they're actually working with too.
Yep.
So that's actually super dope. And thank you, Mark.
I talk to all my customers. Anybody has any questions, even if you're not even if you're tuned by somebody else and you just have a couple of questions, I have no problem explaining to people. So I'll talk to everybody. All right.
So good morning, good afternoon, good night, guys. Thank you so much. You already know what to do. Hit me up at all my social medias, boostinmotion IG, Facebook, and boostinmotion@gmail.com. Otherwise than that, guys, let's hit this outro. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Do appreciate you guys. Love you guys very much. You can also check out the 2 links I posted for some of my other videos. Also, on top of that, if you want to purchase some Boost in Motion merch, definitely check the link that I posted also. And finally, if you've been watching all my videos and you enjoy them, please hit the link to subscribe to my YouTube channel. Thank you.